From Glitch HQ on Riverside Avenue in modern modular Minneapolis, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
I'm Martha McGarry, and I make nice games.
I'm Stephen McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Martha Croy, I too make nice games. For this roundtable episode, our topics are runtimes, SDKs, and APIs, mobile games, and game difficulty. And so, if everyone's ready, are you all ready?
Yes.
Let's start.
Mixing it up.
I could have timed that better, because I was going to say runtimes, SDKs, and APIs, oh my. But I held back, and I didn't do that, and now our listeners will never know I even thought of that.
Yep, because they won't hear this.
Nope.
Of course not. Mark, edit that out.
Well, now I'm not gonna.
It's in there.
Episode 30, guys.
Yeah.
We can't celebrate every milestone.
Yeah, we probably should, though.
But
you all need to know.
It's kind of a big deal. We're still new, but
we're
30 is a
doing
lot.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only 52 weeks in a year, so I mean, we're almost there. Like almost a year. Not really.
3/5.
Yeah. Well, what do you say we just get right into it then? Or do we want to talk a little bit about our sort of perennial meta topics, right? Like feedback forum, Stephen.
Yes. nicegames.club/feedback.
Right.
It's a great place. You should go there when you want to give us feedback on our episodes because we're always looking for feedback. We say this all the time on the show. Iteration, feedback, learn from it.
Right.
And we want to learn from the feedback too. So if you could give us feedback at nicegames.club/feedback, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, tell us topics you want to hear and tell us which topics that you've heard on the show that you liked, which we do more or less of. Should we ramble a little bit less at the top of the show, for example? We want to know. So tell us what you think.
Mm-hmm.
That URL again?
nicegames.club/feedback.
All right. Other thing, Reddit at r/gamedev. We're posting our show notes there. So if you want to talk about this episode or other episodes, you can find every week we post the show notes there. So if you're listening to this and you want to hey, I want to elaborate on that, or I want to talk to other people about it, go to reddit.com/r/gamedev and find our thread. The link will also be in the show notes on the website.
It will.
So yeah, we're starting that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see if that works. Now do we get into the topics?
Sure.
All right, thanks. First topic is mine, runtimes, SDKs, and APIs. I think it's a little technical, but I also want to do a little bit of like a primer, sort of do some definitions, because I think...
Yes, please do.
Well, when you start out, especially if you're a self-taught programmer, you hear these things around a lot. You download SDKs or you download APIs and like all these things, and you plug it in and you start working, and then you kind of don't ever deal with those as terms while you're working necessarily. And then when you talk to other developers and they mention these things, you're like, okay, I kind of am following along. So I thought it would be, as I'm a self-taught programmer, it took me a while to figure out what all this meant and the value of knowing these things. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a primer. And to explain to you, Stephen, because you have said that this is something that
I have no idea what these things are.
Which is interesting because it doesn't really hold you back exactly.
No.
But I think it probably it might prevent you from thinking in a way about these things, which is very useful.
Right.
It's definitely helped me. So we'll start off with runtime. So when you write code, there's a couple of different ways it can compile to an application. The basic way is it compiles into machine code that runs on the machine that the processor processes, right? So basically how you imagine it works. A runtime is something that happens in the middle of that. So your code will then run on the runtime, and then the runtime will be an application that runs on the machine. So good examples of this are the Java virtual machine, JVM. So Java was something that was invented long time ago in the ancient days, which was a way for you to write the Java programming language, and it would run on many different types of devices. So you wouldn't have to write different code for different machines, different processors, the way you would in the old days. That's something that was then adopted by Flash. So Flash, Adobe Air, saying that the Flash runtime, the Air runtime, the platform maker, so Oracle in the case of Java, or Sun in the old days, was responsible for writing the runtime for each platform. So they'd write one for Windows, for Mac, for mobile devices, for Java, for DVD players, for ATMs. They would write the runtime specific to that device. So you as a developer never had to do that. You would just write the same Java code and it would run on all those things. You would have hooks that would hook into various hardware capabilities of the different types of things. But basically, it abstracted a lot of that from you. And that's what the value of a runtime. But it also means that there's a step between your code and the machine. So things tend to run a little bit slower. So this was a criticism of Android early on, is Android runs on a modified Java runtime, or it did, called Dalvik. Java runtime specifically designed for Android. Later, Google did something, the new runtime is called Android Runtime, or ART, very cutely named. But still, it works that way, where your code is compiled not when you compile it necessarily. It runs on the machine when the user starts it up. So there's a little bit of an abstraction. JavaScript is the same way. Node.js is a popular one, but just basically like your browser has a JavaScript runtime, and that's why JavaScript is it's an uncompiled language. Like you just view source and see it because it compiles at runtime. So that is the most extreme example, and it's hilarious how fast JavaScript is these days because all the engineering effort it takes to improve those runtimes. Whereas if you would compile that ahead of time, it would run just a lot faster probably. Anyways, so those are some examples. .NET is another one. That's Microsoft's runtime for Windows. That's pretty common. Uses C#. So those are all examples. You've probably heard these before, but there's a difference between that and, say, C++ code, right? Where it just compiles natively to the device you're running on. So that's one step of it. You generally don't have to worry about that, especially if you're using with Unity. You write in C#. It, what would we say, like the Mono or...
yeah. Isn't Mono built on C++ or something?
Yeah, it compiles down. It's
or C.
See, this one I don't have a lot of experience with. So
I forget how that works. It was explained during the immersion program, and I've completely forgotten.
We'll put something in the show notes about how Unity handles it. But the uptake is basically that it works the sort of same way, where you don't have to worry about it, right? And so that's where then you get into like engines. So the Unity engine is basically just the code that's there that you don't write. You know what I mean? So
that I kind of get.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you use Mono Develop, and that's part of the engine.
That's your IDE, your integrated development environment.
Okay.
That is basically just your text editor, right?
Oh, sure.
Engine is a kind of a fuzzy term. It's a SDK is another way. You can do a software development kit, like the Android SDK, or for my game is an Air game, so it uses the Air SDK. That is basically just, at least in Air's case, it's pre-compiled code that's written in the same language that you write yours in, right? So it's not the runtime. So that gives you access to sort of basic functionality to that system.
It's the scripts that are there before you start programming.
So
like the 2D collider in Unity and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
That is part of the SDK for Unity, part of the Unity engine.
Sure.
Every script you write in Unity is a child of mono behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Mono behavior is a class that's part of the Unity SDK.
Okay.
If you wanted to, if you were crazy, you can go in and edit that. I mean, I don't know if it's delivered to you compiled or not or whatever, but it's not an immutable part of the language or the runtime. That's part of the library or the SDK. See, I'm already confusing these terms. But SDK is really important because that is it's particularly the type of if you're not making games, it matters more what SDK you choose because of the types of things you work with. So like an Android or iOS has an SDK, like these platforms that allow you to do things like UI implementations and certain helper functions or utilities that you can just call. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for a lot of these things. In Windows, if you use the Universal Windows Platform SDK, with just a couple lines of script, you can create a window with the close button and all the normal things that are part of a Windows application without having to actually write those individually.
Right. Okay.
And so all of that is the sort of could call it the engine or the SDK. Okay. So that's basically the sort of the big stuff you almost never have to touch, right?
Right.
So the thing that you have more of a hand in would be like an API. So
yes.
Application Programmer Interface. I think that's the right acronym.
Sounds right to me.
Something like that.
Yeah. It's basically code that that is written somewhere else that you can then have access to. So an API is usually something more specific. So an SDK is filled with APIs, right? You can write your own APIs, which is something I've sort of taken to really recently as sort of, that's really, really helped me out.
Right. Okay.
It's an interface for you, the programmer, to build more things with.
Okay.
So it's like, it's kind of, I don't know if I'm describing this right, but it's like, it's as if the blueprint was part of the house, sort of. Oh.
Interesting. Okay.
All I think of is web APIs. So that's
different.
It's
all applicable. So, I mean,
it's like here's a function that will give you this data, and you don't have to go write the function, and you don't have access to any of the things in the function necessarily, but you can call it and get the stuff. That's what usually happens in web API.
Oh, like there's what's it? Collider. It's Collider 2D something or other in Unity. Maybe like, and it gives you the data that when you collide with something, it gives you that data. Is that an API?
I mean, when you're working with it in code, yeah. So, or, you know, a lot of times these things will be written as classes. So like, with like time.delta time or something like that.
Right.
Like those, like those sorts of things, that those little pieces, that is you as a developer are interacting with the SDK, and that you're doing that through an API.
Okay.
So that's the structure of it. So it's important to know how these things are put together, even in the sort of like hazy way I've described it here, because it helps you then understand that your code is just more code on what's already there. Especially if you're working with Unity, if you're working with other engines or libraries, you know, Phaser or anything else, or GameMaker or any of these sort of like things that can get you on your feet, where you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or like Box 2D physics engines, like you don't have to do all these things yourself, but you need to know how to interface with them. And then once you know how to interface with them, you can realize that you can extend upon them, right? You can write a class that's a child of a class that's part of the SDK.
Yeah.
And then you can override methods and variables to make it suitable to your application.
Oh, okay.
And so if you don't know that you can do that, then it becomes very difficult, because then you end up with lots of like vestigial code, and you do end up reinventing the wheel. Or most libraries come with like a utility class. So things like degrees to radians, you know. That's like, you know, I wrote one of those myself in my own game before I realized that I have two different libraries that have them.
Oh, dang.
That I have available.
No.
I just didn't know that, you know. They're not any better. They're just there, right? But that comes to sort of the next topic, which, you know, writing your own APIs. So the example that it's the one I'm probably the most proud of and took me the longest, and so I talk about it a lot, is in my game, every button is one line of code. And then that calls a class that itself has subclasses and all of that. So I've written my own API for a type of button that I want in my game that implements the style and implements icons that I've created and behaviors. When I put a bunch of them in a row, it knows how to sort them and how to use things for a mouse rollover, all of that stuff. It took me a long time to build these things. But now when I want to edit my own application, I'm like, I want to change this menu to play test it differently. I want to change the order of these buttons, or have split this menu into two menus. That's like a 5-minute job for me. And it works just perfectly, rather than having to like rebuild it completely. Even from already existing components, is that my code builds those components.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, does that make sense? Like why you might want to do it that way rather than building it visually?
Yeah, I guess. It's a lot of stuff, but it's interesting, because I definitely think it'll help. Like, I feel like we do that a little bit in Fingens. Each player's ship and enemies are built with like they're built in a similar structure, I suppose. They each have, and this is kind of out of date. We should update this, because Fingens back in the day was kind of a different game.
Yeah.
But everything is made up of a body. We call it the hull. And they have cannons and they have gadgets. Enemies don't really use gadgets, but they have that functionality in. Cannon is this thing that it shoots the bullets and whatever else. Most everybody has that. Hull is like what takes the damage, and what when you collide with something, it checks for that and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. That those maybe we made our own.
I mean, that's the upshot. Is you basically build tools to build things later.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Lane does that all the time.
Yeah. I wouldn't. That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
Like, and that, I mean, it's really. I mean, I describe my example as this one line of code because I think it's sort of simple to explain. But because a lot of these terms are sort of fuzzy and they're really conceptual, it applies to anything that does that job.
Okay.
Which is building your own tools. Right.
Yeah.
There's sort of like lessons learned, I guess. That is sort of why I wanted to talk about it. Is like the more I go back to my code and look at these things, like, oh, I wrote this function 3 times, or oh, I have this thing that does this, but I could just take all of the objects in my game and make them children of something that because they all have the same categories, right? They all run the same collider functions.
Yeah.
They all operate on the same like texture loading setup. So rather than having like a texture atlas setter in my player class, my platform class, like I'll just make them all a child of Metro Nexus object, and then Metro Nexus object will have those sorts of things. And so, I mean, that's just really about inheritance. But being able to take your code and just make it smaller, less reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And the way you understand that is how libraries and SDKs are already built. And then, the easier it is for you to build your own.
Okay. Huh. I bet web development is like kind of complicated too, right?
Oh.
I don't, I mean, I only use Unity and I kind of have a base level understanding of it now. Thank you. Yeah. But like web development's got to be crazy too, right?
So we deal a lot with APIs when we're dealing with third-party services and stuff like that.
Okay.
So like an API in that sense is the functions that are made open to the public. So,
Okay.
or to people with API keys, they call them, which are just basically passwords that you can, token things that you can send back and forth. They let only certain amounts of data out and they hide functionality in the function, sort of, if that makes sense. So like instead of you writing a SQL query to get the data, you just call this function and it will run the query over here without you seeing it. So then people can't like write their own stuff to get all the, or in drop table or whatever.
Is that like a security thing?
Yeah, it black boxes that element, and that's a really good example. So one that I've used recently is we talked about it on our bots episode, but interacting with the Twitter API, you do need a key for that that is tied to a Twitter account, and then you run functions, but then it limits how much you can interact with it, and like if you make too many requests, it knows. But also, like you don't really know what's happening over there on Twitter's side. You just send them the request with your line of code. So there is some security elements there. But when you're doing it in your own code, the same kind of applies, right? So when I want to add a new button to a menu, I don't need to worry about the button breaking because there's no way I can screw it up because I've written my API that anything I put in there will either work or it will throw an error for me.
Okay.
Right? Because I set it up to be like, sorry, you can't put, even though this object or this argument will accept multiple types of objects, right? It'll accept a vector drawing object, or it will also accept a text string and then draws what it needs to. The object itself is just an any object argument, but so it won't throw me a compiler error. But if I put an integer there, all right, or if I put something else in that space, I run my own check inside my own black boxed class, which checks to see that that's correct. So basically you write the API and then you don't ever touch it again. I mean, you do a lot, but you're not supposed to, right? And so, but that's, even though it's very different applications, when you're working with those kinds of like APIs that are by third parties that you need, special access to, the purpose is the same. Right, it's designed so that it's an easy access for developers. It's a safe environment for them, and I know I've seen a little bit of the guts of Fingens. You guys do similar things. So when you publicly expose variables to a component, right, and then you can modify those in the editor. Right, you don't expose things you don't want to mess with. Right,
most of the time.
See? But that you have some public variables, but you don't. There's inside the component, inside the script, you do some math or something, and there's some variables that are just stored internally there.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to mess with those in the editor.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So working in the editor is analogous to you writing that one line of code to call the API.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that's basically when you are changing values in the Unity editor, you're interacting with the API of the script that you have.
Okay.
So it's basically the same thing. Before we move on to the next topic, the reason I brought this up is because I have totally broken my game last couple weeks.
That's good to hear.
It's like it is in shambles, and the reason is because I updated all of my libraries.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was complaining to you about this a while ago, Stephen. So my game runs on Adobe Air, and it uses the Citrus engine, which is it's a scene manager basically. It's really good. It uses the Box 2D physics engine. It uses the Starling library to display graphics on the GPU. Very performant. I quite like all of these things. It uses a thing called GAF, which is generic animation format, which is a way to take vector animation, like the kind you would make in Flash, and turns it into raster sprite sheets so it can perform well on a GPU.
Okay.
These are all libraries which all had updates in the past couple months. And, it's Flash, so a lot of these things they don't update a lot, frankly. But these were pretty. The main one was Starling. The Starling graphics library went to 2.0 some time ago, and made a lot of changes, big performance improvements, and then all of the libraries that depend on that, which is every library I have, slowly also updated. They're all updated now. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to rip the band and do all of these at once. Everything is broken. Everything is broken.
Mark. Oh no.
And a lot of this is because, there was some changes to how the APIs worked. And a lot of times it's just like name changes, functions would get moved from one class to another. So I'd have to call them in other places. Some utility classes that had tons of like really fun methods on it got broken out into more. So it was just some organizational stuff. And that was actually fun to like go through and fix because I really appreciated the changes they made. Also, I had better like debug tools and like all this stuff. So I'm very happy to have done it, or I will be rather when it's fixed again. But I think it sort of exposed how long ago I started working with these things because I'm utterly certain that like just the quick changes I needed to make. There's like migration guides for upgrades like this. I just must have been doing it really badly because it didn't work with this new version even after I made all the migration changes, which is kind of good because I get to kind of go back and rewrite some of these things, which might seem like a waste of time, but it's a good learning experience for me. And like accessing these things correctly. So I have this asset manager class, which loads up all the embedded assets in my game so that it's ready to go, and I can keep track of that. The way I can implement loading screens correctly. That's great. I only really need one asset manager at a time. But in my game, all of my levels have their own asset manager that get called and disposed when levels. I don't need to do that. I can just have one. There's lots of little architectural changes that are revealing themselves to me. But that's why I wanted to talk about this, because if I didn't have like if I didn't slowly learn the sort of like language of this, like how to think about it, like conceptually, I'd have been even more lost than I am. So everything's broken, but I'm not panicking. Okay. I'm just kind of grumbling. So I guess that's kind of the lesson is like, like I'm a self-taught programmer. I'm not really an expert in any of these things, but like I feel so much more confident because I kind of I can understand how these concepts work together. Yeah. And I don't exactly know what to do next right now, but like I have options. I can now more recognize when things aren't working. I will also recognize what of my code is old because it's of how it works. Rather than it being like just like looking up the last file change, Yeah. So, but when you update Unity, similar things happen. Yeah, it
sounds very similar to how Unity would work.
Yeah. You have to make some code changes and you have to make some changes in scenes and stuff like that. Yeah. It's not that much different. It's just that it's not as well documented as Unity. So like at least at this stage. But yeah, it's been very helpful for me to think about these topics and to remind myself how important it is to like not just be like, oh yeah, I got it. Like actually to think about it because it helps you write your code better. It helps you read code better, which is really important. Yeah. And when disasters like this happen, you don't jump out a window.
Don't want that.
No.
That would be bad.
You just get really grumpy gills.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess let that be I don't know. There's no moral here.
Well, the moral is learn your runtimes, SDKs, and APIs.
I suppose so.
And hopefully our listeners have done so.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Next up.
Mobile games.
Mobile games.
Mobile games. What is it about mobile games you want to talk about, Martha?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this topic lately because I got my phone mugged, and so now I had to start over on all of my mobile games.
Aww.
But it's kind of exciting because I get to start over on all my mobile games.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Start it from the beginning like a noob.
So if you could find that mugger, you would, 1, punch them in the face, and 2, shake their hand.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everything old is new again. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you're okay, right?
Yeah. I'm good.
Okay. Our listeners, I don't want them to worry.
Oh, yes. No, I wasn't hurt at all.
And you got a new phone? Like, did you get that right away, or?
Yeah, I got it the next day.
Oh, okay.
I stole my dad's upgrades, so thanks, Dad.
What was that process like? Like transferring everything over? Do you have a lot of things cloud saved, or?
I lost so many things.
Oh no!
I lost all my pictures from Train Jam.
Oh no!
And like a ton of my flute recordings.
Oh.
So that's a big bummer. Don't steal people's phones, guys. Pro tip. Makes them very sad.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Also, if any train jammers are listening, you should send me your pictures. Yeah, I thought we should go around and talk about what mobile games do we play and what are some cool ones? Because I think that there's some really good ones out there.
Does
and we
Nintendo Switch count?
No, Steven.
No,
Okay.
it's a hybrid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're specifically talking about phone and tablet games.
Yes,
so not handheld games.
Yes.
Which, wow, that's confusing, isn't it?
That is confusing.
And think about that. Like, how were you supposed to know the difference between a Nintendo DS and a Nokia, whatever the phone is?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to categorize it,
Right.
but a 3DS has a joystick and buttons, and that's mostly what phones don't have.
Yeah.
And so that really definitely it isn't to say that 3DS is touchscreen. So there have been mobile type games. I'm using the air quotes again on 3DS.
Yeah.
There have been there are platformers that with buttons
Right.
on the screen. Like,
And in fact, there's this one game that I haven't really been playing mobile games recently. Because I have the Switch now. but
Steven has been neglecting a lot of the rest of his life.
It's true. It's true.
He doesn't have friends now.
No, I don't even know how I got on this podcast.
He's playing Mario Kart right now.
But one game that I really did
This
enjoy
is an
playing.
intervention. Sorry, continue.
One game that I really did enjoy playing was called Slan. I think it used to be a web browser game, and they recently ported it into to phones or whatever. But it's really cool. You play as there's a whole bunch of different characters you can play as. You can play as a knight and a mage and an archer. And what you can do is you basically there's just this flat plane, and your sword guy, he just holds his sword straight up, and he just kills everything he walks into because he's just that good, I guess. But what's really fun, it's really simple, and so all you have to do is just avoid getting hit, because your the hit box is the sword. Make sure you hit enemies with that, but your hurt box is just the soldier, so you don't want to get hit. You don't want to like jump into an enemy or anything like that, so you just run and make sure you don't do that. And it's super simple, but it was really fun because I don't know, it was so simple. You could just do it whenever, and it didn't take a lot of brain power. And I think a lot of the strength in mobile games is that you just pick it up and start playing it whenever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for the games I play, I don't know. I think you have to kind of as a game developer or a game enthusiast, you almost have to I always feel like I have to apologize. I don't really play a lot of mobile games. But the truth is there are statistics. People mostly just email, web browsing, and Twitter and Facebook. That's kind of what everyone uses their phones for. And so, incidentally, the most successful apps on mobile are games, because all people do are those basic things, and then they sometimes play games.
Yeah.
So, but even then, it's still a small category of what people use their phones for. And I'm definitely one of those people. A phone is a productivity and goof off device. It's not really something I think about to play games. But there's a couple of things. Every time I go on a plane, I'm like, I should download a game or something to play. I have a Switch now, so that'll change. But,
The Switch, death of mobile games.
one series that I found recently that I really like is the Square Enix Go games. So Lara Croft Go.
Oh, yeah.
Hitman
I
Go.
downloaded the Lara Croft one.
And the latest one, Deus Ex Go, is the newest one. And they're all basically just sort of like puzzle games, kind of board puzzle games. If you haven't heard of them already, we'll put them in the show notes and you can check them out. But they're really fun because it really takes advantage of the mobile form factor in that it's not twitchy. It uses touch screens, but it doesn't require precision. But it's very much like you stare at your phone and do a lot of thinking. So it's definitely a puzzle game. And I do quite like those the best, because then the form factor doesn't matter as much. So that and the other thing I really like are trivia games. So there's one called Quiz Up, which is really fun. It's been around for a long time, but you can really just sit and you just tap answers on your phone for hours and hours and hours. And what's fun about that game is that it's all categories, and it's tons and tons of categories. So, for example, there's a Star Trek category.
Oh man,
which I totally am the best at.
100% right there. I'm sure.
And what it does is it gives you 10 questions, and then it matches you up against somebody random in that category, and then of a similar ranking as you. And then you just, so it's accuracy and speed. It's just it's not a very complicated, a concept for a trivia game. But the interface is very good. There's just I don't know how they must crowdsource some of their questions because there are just tons of them. I mean, there's like the Woody Allen movies. There's like, I'm sure there's probably like street names in Cincinnati category. Like there's just tons and tons of really like very minute, like atomized categories of quizzes, and then broader ones as well, like general knowledge or random or whatever. But that's a great time waster. It requires internet access though, so can't play it on the plane.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
You could play against other plane people. That'd be cool.
Oh, that would be good. Like set up a little local thing because
So you can beat everybody on the plane in Star Trek.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really, really like this game called Alpha Bear.
Alpha Bear.
It's by Kit Fox, I think their name is.
Okay.
Ava has a cup with all the bears on it.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
And it's amazing. You spell words. It's basically Scrabble, sort of, or Boggle, I guess. You get like a little board and you have to click the letters to make words, and then the letters disappear and the bears grow bigger out into the space that the letters have stopped occupying.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's Boggle, but adorable.
Yes. It is so adorable.
That's cool.
And like each bear has a different power. So like there's timed modes, and some bears give you like time, like more time in those modes, or some of them give you extra points for certain letters. And all of them have little like costumes. There's like dog bear and owl bear.
Dog bear and owl bear? Oh my goodness.
And
that's great.
Wizard bear and stuff like that. Wrestler bear, robber bear.
So is a big part of the appeal of this like the aesthetic?
All
more
of
so
the
than
bears.
gameplay?
Yes.
That's good. That's good. I guess that's true of like the Square Enix games. Like they're really engaging puzzles, but half the fun of it is just like the gorgeous character models and like really excellent design and UI. I don't know if I would enjoy it much if it weren't for that sort of like feel, right?
Yeah, they definitely have the juice, as
Lane would say.
As Lane would say.
That's something mobile games, like for most of them, are kind of gross looking. Like even the popular ones, like that mobile aesthetic of like lots of bouncing and pulsing things, rounded corners, just the Candy Crush look. I mean, even like a game like Cut the Rope, which is really fun. Like I like that game. I cannot stand the way that game looks.
Really?
I don't know.
Like I'm definitely with you on Candy Crush Saga or whatever. But Cut the Rope seems okay. I don't know.
The game is great,
Yeah.
and so it gets kind of a pass from me. But if it weren't for that, I was like, oof, I don't.
Ooh. You know, one game I definitely should mention because I'm sure my brother will like yell at me if I don't, and I'm calling him out right now, Charles. His favorite game is like Jetpack Joyride. He loves that dang game. He used to play it all the dang time because he has a tablet.
Yeah.
And so he would it's super simple for him to just, tap and go up and down. Basically, Jetpack Joyride it's kind of like those helicopter games that people used to play, except you are a dude who has a jetpack who shoots bullets, and that's how he flies. I don't really know why they decided to do that. It's weird, but that's basically the whole game. And you just keep this guy, what's his name, Barry or something? He stole the jetpack and he's just trying to escape with it. And you're going through the scientific facility, and it's gigantic because it just never ends.
It's a runner, right?
Yeah, right. It's an endless runner. And so all you do is you avoid obstacles. You can give the scientist high five, I guess, because I don't know. That's also part of the game.
Awesome.
But that game. My brother loved that game, and he I think he had to restart it, or no, he had it on like 4 different devices or something. He had it on his Vita, his PlayStation Vita, because he's one of those people. And he has it on his Windows phone because he's one of those people. And he had it on his tablet and I think some other stuff. I think because I remember he used to play it on a TV. So I think he had a PlayStation TV or whatever.
Yeah.
So because he's one of those people.
Well, it's a one button input game. I think it has been ported to everything.
Yeah,
It has a button or a screen.
Right. So if it makes sense for it to be on those kinds of things.
I played that game for a little while, and but it's another one where it has that sort of bubbly aesthetic, that cartoony. Like I like cartoony, but this is a specific mobile game cartoony style.
Yeah.
Like I don't like. I have speaking of calling people out, my nephew, who I gave my phone to at a dinner so he would calm down. Had him play this game, and then I got a notification on my watch thank you for buying all this DLC.
Oh, dang.
Spent like $15 on it. And I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I'm a USA Today story. Like,
Oh, man. That's one thing about mobile games that's interesting is that a lot of them are exploitative.
yeah.
I
Yes.
can't come up with a nicer way of saying that.
Yeah. Do we want to get into that? Because we've talked about this off mic. And
Oh, no,
And
no.
by talked, you mean
screamed at each other. Yeah. We might want to save that one. So stay tuned because that coming attraction.
That's for Nice Games Club After Dark.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
I
maybe we should-
specifically did not put that as one of my questions.
Okay.
That's right.
So,
Pass for now.
Let's move on.
one of the things I want to talk about is like what sort of games work well on mobile platforms? Because we talk a lot about like designing stuff for PC and for consoles and stuff like
Right.
that. And we don't talk a lot about like what are some good design things for mobile platform games?
Yeah.
Or like examples that you've seen of people or things that work well.
Yeah. It's interesting. My brother, the perpetual student, Charles McGregor, he made a game called Glitch in the System. I think it's still available on Windows Store and stuff. But he made it for just PC. It's a twin stick shooter. But he ported it to mobile games because I think he thought it would be more successful there. And what it uses is he downloaded a plugin that gave him like the interface to have twin sticks in there, and then that's how you use it. It ends up working out okay, which is very surprising to me because in general I don't like it when mobile games have like buttons unless they're huge. Like in Slayin, you have because you have to move left and right. They have left and right buttons, but it works out in there because there's only that and then the jump button. But in general, I would suggest people design around or design away from using buttons specifically in mobile games because oftentimes they don't, at least to me, maybe it's just me, but they don't feel intuitive. They don't feel natural. It feels almost forced a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's kind of two categories of input for a mobile game. There's one where there are buttons on the screen, right? There, it's like Quiz Up. You choose your answer. You just press what you want. Or it looks more like an app, right? You just have UI, and that forms the meat of the game.
Yep.
And then there are games like Jetpack Joyride, where anywhere on the screen you just touch to operate.
Yep.
And then in that category also you have the virtual joystick and buttons kind of thing. Like so, Sega ported a lot of like old games to mobile, and they use that. Or it looks like a sort of a half transparent Genesis pad on front of your screen. And, a lot of people who, they want to make games and they're like, well, mobile's where it's at, but I just want to make Mario. They do that. And then that's why none of those are very successful. 'Cause I think that's very challenging for people. There was some breakthrough years ago that like, oh, wait, you don't have to have a joystick just in the lower left. It can be just wherever you touch, the joystick appears.
Yeah.
And in fact, the first version of Metro Nexus, when I was making it originally years ago, before I sort of taken it, was a mobile game. And it used, it had a one button for jump, and then joystick, which appeared anywhere on the left side of the screen you touched, with the joystick would appear and you can go left or right. And because my game is a sort of runner, it's like a looping runner, you don't ever have to hold the joystick down. You just have to turn left or turn right.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like, oh, it'll work. And then it wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. And then I was always testing it on my computer and with a keyboard. And I was like, well, let's see if I can get gamepad things working. So I don't know, so I can do Android TV or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, this would just be a game with a controller.
Yeah.
And it was like a slow kind of like coconut to the head kind of moment. Like, well, duh. Like I just had this idea of I wanted to make a mobile game because that's what I was familiar with. The workflow was. And so, but yeah, so I'm very, since that in my own game, I've been very skeptical of any game that thinks it can work that way
with buttons and
with
things.
like virtual,
with a virtual joystick.
Yeah. So I'm skeptical, but I'm not confident about that. I feel like that's very much colored by like me feeling like, oh, if you're going to do that, just make a PC game.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But I'm throwing my hands in the air when I say that. Like it's, there's got to be good examples,
I mean, the thing about mobile games, I think, is that it's largely the convenience and the interface.
Yeah.
I think that once you have to design around that, if you want your players to be able to just jump in and be able to play it whenever, and you want to utilize the touchscreen to the best effect. Super Mario Run is actually pretty good at that.
Yeah.
what did they say that you could play that game while eating a cake in the other hand?
Yeah.
And they have
That's
a video
awesome.
of that. And actually, that was it's really interesting and well designed, I would say. It's too bad it came out after the Switch came out, because otherwise I would have been all over that game. But like what it does is Mario, it's an automatic, or it's an endless runner, not an endless runner. It ends.
It does end.
So it's not endless, but it is a runner.
That's what's good about it. It has level design. It's
Yeah.
not procedurally generated.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what turned me off the Jetpack Joyride in the end. It's like it's just going for high scores. That's not really a game for me.
Eventually, yeah, that's effectively what it ends up being. But in Super Mario Run, it has levels, and all you do is you tap to have Mario do certain actions. Most of the time, it's just jumping. And if you tap with certain timing, you can get like different things. Like sometimes there's blocks on the ground that give you a long jump if you tap right on it, or if you tap when you're like next to an enemy, you'll hop on that enemy and do a little spin or something. So that it utilized it by making your timing more important than the actual movement.
Right. It's very contextual.
Yes.
And I think that's what it makes it have some depth, because it is, you can play it one-handed while eating a cake, but that doesn't mean it's a shallow game.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's pretty interesting, interestingly designed.
yeah. And it's a game that if you had it's suited for mobile, right? It's designed, there's no reason you couldn't make that for a home system.
Right.
But like it leverages what's good about the mobile platform.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it the biggest success or anything.
Well,
but,
yeah, it's not the biggest success, but I think it's just.
But if you were gonna put
job.
Mario on a phone, I don't know that I don't know I would have come up with that as the way to do it, and it was a really, really. I think they did it right.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah, but those are the kinds of things you got to pay attention to when you're designing a game. You just got to make sure that it's convenient for a user to get into, and that it uses the interface well. Because I know there are like MMOs on the thing and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you got to sit there and wait for it to load the,
Oh, God.
the next map.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
Or people use tilt controls to like move through a 3D space
Yeah.
because you can build something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's people not understanding. They just want to use the bells and whistles. And you
Right.
kind of can't blame them for trying, but it's you can kind of. I get frustrated when people don't learn that's the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
You know? But I don't really like action games on mobile. Like I much prefer puzzle or we're thinking. I guess the difference is like Quiz Up is very much like a timed game, but it's still not. It uses an interface. It's not.
Yeah.
The gameplay happens in your head rather than on the screen. I guess that's kind of what I prefer.
Right. So it's not like you're playing Zelda. It's like you're playing
Yeah.
Civilization or something.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, there was a Civilization game that was for consoles. What's it called? Civilization.
Geez. Like I would know that, but because I played it a little bit.
It was a simplified version.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes. But it was a simplified version of Civ. It was made for consoles. But then they realized that they could make it for tablets. And they did. And it was actually pretty good.
Oh, I'm going to have to check this
You
out.
should. So, there's that sort of that divide between like those. So like a game like Cut the Rope is a puzzle game, but it has lots of timing elements.
Yeah.
So that's a middle ground that I think that I like. But I much prefer games like the Square Enix Go games where it's really it is about thinking of a solution and executing it. Because when you're playing a mobile game, you're like slouched on the couch. You're not like in the sort of peak hand-eye coordinated physical condition where you don't want to be, right? When I'm playing something on a train or on a plane, like I don't necessarily. This is kind of why I'm not as excited to play a Switch game on a plane. Because I feel like I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to be in like gaming comfort. You know what I mean? I much prefer to play something more casual, more less action oriented.
Okay, I guess I disagree. Well, not disagree with you.
I want to see you play ARMS with motion control.
Oh man,
on a plane.
Oh dude, we should talk. Dang it, that's not a topic. We should just talk about ARMS. Oh man,
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Next time.
But that did what you were talking about did remind me of a game called Hoplite that I really like.
Yeah.
It's you basically play as a hoplite, and I don't know where hoplites come from. I don't
even know what that is.
It's some soldier dude, and he's going in a dungeon, and he has to get this fleece for some reason.
You're making all of this up.
No, I swear.
Hercules?
No, maybe. I think it had something to do with. I think it was like a Roman thing or something. But anyway, or Greek. What's Hercules?
I don't know.
Okay, one of those things. We're not historians here, guys.
He's Greek.
Okay. Anyways,
I say with the authority of someone who's 75% sure.
anyways, what you do is you just like have to defeat different enemies to get to you just keep going down. I think you had to get to 31 floors to grab this fleece and then teleport up because I don't know. That's how they had it back then. I don't know. But it's really cool because it's designed. It like there's nothing much visually. All of the things are pixely, boring sprites. There's not much visually there, which is totally fine. It's mainly just gameplay stuff, and you know me, gameplay dude.
Yeah,
it's really well designed because it's basically a puzzle game, and you just have to understand how this AI is going to interact with your move. It's turn based, so every time you move, the enemies move right after you. You can kill an enemy. You just need to make sure you can get through the thing. All the decisions you make are just really interesting because you can upgrade yourself every once in a while. You might want to buy a heart to give yourself more health, or you can pick up augments, just like in Vengeance, that change how you use different things. Like you can throw your spear, and maybe you can get an augment thing that when you throw your spear, it stuns enemies around it. It's really interesting. I highly recommend it. It's quite fun.
it sounds really complicated, though.
It is not.
I'm not saying that as a detriment. I just
right? No.
Say for a mobile game.
It sounds complicated, but it's not. I'm probably not doing it justice, but it's really not that complicated. I think it's free. They have a free version. I think I just shelled out I think it was like $3 or $5 for the full version, but that's good. It's a good game. But I do like certain action games on mobiles too. Like, what's the name of it? I think it's not Breakout. Oh, dang. I don't remember the name of it. But you throw metal balls at like glass pillars. And you just move down this corridor and you just keep throwing metal balls at glass pillars. It's really fun because you're breaking glass.
That's awesome.
Yeah, all right.
Wait, what is this?
It's like Vandal Simulator. Like,
oh my God.
Oh, dang it. What's the name?
This is like my dream, except I want it in VR.
Ooh, that would be fun in VR, wouldn't it?
Right? Okay, off topic. Continue.
Side note, I played Rick and Morty VR last night, and there's like a ton of like glass beakers, and I just spent some time throwing them around and breaking things.
I mean, that's what you do with glass beakers. You don't put things in them. You throw them in.
Fun part of that game is that it remembers everything. So as the longer you play it, the more of a mess around you there is.
Oh,
it's kind of cool.
Wow. Okay, that is pretty cool. Dang, I have to remember the name. I will put that in the show notes too.
Oogie.
Because like I cannot remember it, but it's really fun. I want to call it Breakout, but it's not Breakout. But yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. So what kind of games would you love to see more on mobile, if any? Or like if you were going to design some cool mobile game.
I would like more sort of puzzle games that have narrative. Because I do a lot of reading on my phone. Like,
oh, yeah.
And I know not everybody likes to, but I feel like that's something that is not a very well-served category. Or maybe I just haven't experienced enough of that kind of thing. But something that is a narrative that has a slower pace sort of puzzle mechanic to it. I think I'd be really into something like that. I don't know that I'm the one to design that, though. I don't have a lot of ambition to make something like that, but I definitely want to play it. Martha, make me one.
Oh, okay. Well, I've had this idea for a really long time. I want to make a text game. And by text, I mean actual SMS messages to like a Google number or something, and have it like if you send it certain text, it will send you back certain things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be so cool because then you could play a game without using data, because that's one problem that I have is that I've got limited data, so I don't want to play a lot of games that go out to the web to play. And so I was like, oh man, it'd be so cool if I could just do a text adventure literally by text.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
There is a game, and this is another, I'm not going to remember the name of this one, but we'll look it up. And it's where you sign up on a website, I think, and then you get a phone call, and it's a voicemail message, and then it gives you instructions, and it's played through phone and text. And there's some web, I think, but I think it's designed to be, there's no Chrome or there's no app that it's a system. And it is very much where you play the role, and you get random calls, like in the middle of your day, and then you have to do something and it's, I forget the scenario too, but it's not like a hostage situation. There's some sort of like crisis you have to be a part in solving.
Oh,
it's a little bit of kind of what you want.
That sounds intense.
just that as a genre, I think is really interesting as a way to use like mobile phones, right? Like not just mobile screens.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. And because it's a device you have on you, so it's a passive, almost ARG kind of experience. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. At the same time, those things can be gimmicky or annoying, perhaps. It's maybe hard to build a sustainable type of thing that's not just sort of a, get some sort of attention for its novelty. I guess I need to play a couple of these to really see if it has legs.
Cool.
Yeah. You'd have to set it so that it wouldn't call you at times that you wouldn't want it to call you.
Yeah. I think it does make some accommodations for reality, but it's...
Yeah, I hope it's not calling you at 3:00 in the morning.
Well, I mean, and if you sign up for something, maybe that's what you sign up for. You know, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't. I mean, that's part of it's part role playing, right? So
I'd uninstall that app right away. I'm just saying. I don't want to be woken up 3:00 in the morning.
On my to-do list, I'm like, sign Steven up for this.
Let's see. What kind of mobile game would I want? I feel like I want a fighting game. Something competitive that I could play with other people. And I've talked about it on the show before, but Vengeance was initially designed to be a shoot 'em up that you competed with others to get a high score in. Didn't end up working out, but I would like something that I could do with other people more frequently. And maybe not necessarily like device to device, because that would be maybe more complicated than I want, but just, I could play it and then pass it to somebody else and then they would compete against me. That would be kind of fun. I don't know what kind of thing. It could be a shooter. Games where like score is very important.
Awesome. Well, there was some ideas out there for you, all you game developers listening who want to make mobile games.
Yeah, make them for us so we can play them.
Please.
And
review them on the show. Yeah. Or, well, maybe not review them on the show. We can play them on the show.
Yeah.
I'll just play them while I'm talking.
Yeah.
Because I'm still playing Mario Kart, guys.
Yeah. Just got first place.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I thought of another category before we move on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is board games. I toyed with this. I've never owned a full size tablet. At least not till recently, but I don't really. Anyway, but a long time ago, I was thinking like, oh, I'd love to do like a board game on on an iPad or full size Android tablet, and I just never really got around to exploring that too much. But I've always wanted to do that, where it's not much different from board game, but you can do a little bit more random number generation. There are games like the XCOM board game that have apps that go with it.
That's right.
But I really want to see more like just apps that are board games.
I had a Monopoly game on a flip phone that I used to play. That was a thing. I learned apparently in Monopoly what you actually, when you land on a property and you decide not to buy it, that automatically auctions it to everybody else or for everyone to possibly buy. I learned that from that game.
Oh, right.
Because you're playing a video game, so you can't there's no house rules.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why Monopoly is so slow and everybody hates it, is because nobody knows that rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought of another one too.
Okay. Oh man.
Well, another game that's really good, and we love to see more of them like this. Space Team.
Oh,
this awesome.
That's right. I know what that is.
Yeah, it's this awesome game where you everyone has it on their phone. You're like on a spaceship and you have buttons and then you get directions, but your directions are for somebody else. And so you have to yell across the room being like, turn the hyperdrive to 3. And someone else goes, turn the, push the eject button or whatever. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of co-op meat-based games. Well, like Drawful is a game that's technically not a mobile game, but you play it with mobile devices. That is a form factor where it's party games where you're in a real space. It's really cool. So, I mean, the Star Trek Bridge Crew just came out. It's a VR game that's very similar concept, where you just have to work together. But that as a mobile experience, much more accessible,
right?
Than having to get 4 VR kits, which I'm working on. I want to get a lot of people together and do that. But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised there aren't more of those types of co-op mobile games. Maybe we should make one. Next Game Jam, guys.
There we
go.
Let's do it. That'd be fun.
Sounds a little difficult too. Huh?
Transitions. That segues well into the next topic. Difficulty.
Yeah.
You guys like hard games?
Not really.
No.
Oh, dang, really? Am I the only one here? Okay, fine.
Topic over.
Well, that was fun, guys. No, it depends on the game, but I enjoy hard games.
Yeah.
But it really does depend on the game. Like Super Meat Boy was fun for a while. I never did beat that game. Don't tell my brother. But like, I don't know, games like Bayonetta or Super Meat Boy, like, it ties a little bit into the mastery thing again. We've talked about before, but like, I like difficult games because I like feeling like I'm up to the challenge and I'm able to get to that challenge.
Yeah.
But what makes a game difficult? What makes it easy? And what makes a game too difficult or too easy? Like, do you guys have opinions on that?
I don't know. It's, I mean, there's margins of error, right, for actions you do in a game. Yep. So when designing platformers, this is really important. When you want to make a precision platformer or something that's more friendly, like the way you design, what happens when you're almost near the edge of a thing, you can actually program in margins of error, right? Yeah. Or you can level design to counter that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know there's much more to it than that, right? Like enemy design and level design. But I feel like that's because I don't appreciate it as a thing in games as much as you probably do. Well, so I feel like I have a limited understanding of like what is good about a game that's hard.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, like I said, there's a challenge aspect. You got to step up to the plate and take it down.
Yeah.
But I think there are different ways you can think about difficulty. Like one way might be it's very difficult to grasp the controls. You and me, Martha, we made Clawbreaker, and like you basically play it like you're a crab.
Yeah.
And that's part of the charm of the game, but it's part of the difficulties that you have to get a handle on the controls before you can defeat your opponent. Mm-hmm. But another way is just the tuning of the game. Like in Super Meat Boy, the jumps eventually become very difficult because you have to be very precise with how high you jump and how long you jump.
That turns into a rhythm game after a while. Right?
Effectively, it's a rhythm game. That's an interesting way of looking at it that I hadn't considered. But yeah, it's something you have to consider because you may want to make your game very hard for like hardcore gamers who are looking for an extreme challenge, but you also might want to make your game more approachable. So you have to consider that as well.
Yeah.
And so those are the things I kind of think of. Like, I think a lot of it is a tuning thing. Mm-hmm. Just make sure that your controls are tuned in a way that makes it approachable or not approachable if that's what you're going for.
It's interesting you mentioned that idea of like, of controls and so that easing into that mastery element, because that's something that like in my game, it's multiplayer only right now. So there's no enemy AI, there's no challenge in that sense. And the controls are there's not a lot to them, but players, if they want to, can do more with the controls. So you can fire a weapon and you can use the right stick to fire in any direction. But you can use that tools then to jump over a gap and shoot directly below you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a strategy some advanced players will use.
Right.
Or you can use, there are certain items that change what your weapons do, which then just have immediate impact. Like you can drop a mine, or you can do set off an EMP, which will delete other players' claimed territory. Mm-hmm. It's very simple, but you can then strategize on how you employ those in different ways. And so it provides a little bit of an appeal to someone who's looking for a challenge, I suppose. I don't know, because just as you mentioned that, I'm like, I feel like that's, as a designer, I've thought of it in those terms.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my game, it says it's only as hard as the person you're playing against.
Right. I think that's more of it falls into difficulty, but that's like a mastery sort of thing that we were talking about before.
Right. But a single player game, do you think that like having that kind of like dimensionality of controls where you can like, you could very simple, you can get what's going, but then you unlock, but just by playing it, more abilities by combining different actions.
Right.
I feel like that's something how you can tune a game to be difficult but not frustrating. Right. Is by giving someone the opportunity to master those things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with
like
that.
rather than just making it like you have to just time your weapon exactly right instead of very close to exactly right. Like that is harder, but that's not more challenging or more rewarding, right? Because I get very frustrated with difficult games that are just hard because just for very simple reasons.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, I feel because I don't care as much about mastery in that sense, like timing it exactly perfect.
Yeah.
That when I do, I'm like, well, I just got it right this time. Like it doesn't feel like I accomplished anything or I got better at something.
Okay.
But like fighting games are, they have simple controls, but then there's a lot more to it than that. Right?
Well,
so that's maybe a good example.
I'm glad you brought it up because I was thinking of fighting games, Street Fighter in particular. oftentimes a lot of people when they just start playing Street Fighter, it's difficult for them to get a hold on like using special moves because they have, I'd say, less than intuitive inputs to do them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to do. I don't play a lot of Street Fighter, to be honest. That's not my kind of fighting game choice. But they call it Hadoken. You know the Hadoken. Which one is that? That's the fireball.
Mm-hmm.
That has a special movement. You have to do right. No, that's quarter circle right. That's how you do that one. Told you, I don't.
Steven, even I know that.
Well, maybe you should have done the talk.
It's all I know about Street Fighter, but still.
But anyways, with it, like that is difficult for some people because most of the time you don't do a quarter circle forward when you're trying to play a platformer or whatever, what have you play.
Right. It's not something you just would ever stumble upon.
Right. But what's interesting is that there's a new DLC character in Street Fighter V that does away with all of those crazy inputs, and you just like press right to do I think his fireball and things like that. And I feel like there's a controversy there with going around in the community right now. Like, does this make sense for Street Fighter?
Right.
Why are they doing this now? Like I finally figured out how to do these inputs, and now this one guy can do all the inputs without having to do it. It's unfair.
You know, I did read an article about that,
Yeah.
and I found myself very much sympathizing with the designers who are trying to make it more approachable.
Yeah.
Reading a little bit about this new character, I feel like that might be a little bit better for me because I could play more tactically and less about like memorization or perfect twitch controls, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's amazing that they're doing that because
Right.
it feels like it's a total like sand in the shoe of that genre, right?
Yeah. One day we got to talk about fighting games. I should get somebody who plays a lot of fighting games because I know you guys play a lot of fighting games.
Just Clawbreaker.
Yeah. I mean, it is the best. But dang, I wish we had films. We could have seen you do the crab dance. Anyway, but when you really, really, really get into fighting games, like real deep, and you have a pure understanding of like how the controls, and you like intuitively move your character the way you exactly want to it.
Yeah.
When you break it down, you're really like fighting against your opponent. You're trying to see what your opponent is trying to do, and you're trying to like see into his head like what's this person going to do next, or are you going to dodge, or are you going to block, or are you going to or grab or whatever. Like when you really get into it, it's there's an idea in fighting games called Yomi, which is just understanding your opponent and their actions. That's when you really get into it, and like. The difficult thing is a lot of people when they first start playing a fighting game is they have those crazy controls like in Street Fighter or other 2D fighting games, where they can't quite get over that gap, or they have a hard time getting over that gap, and so they don't ever really feel that Yomi part.
Yeah.
There's a new fighting, or not, I don't think it's out yet, but there's like a fighting game where you play as robots and you fight people, and it's supposed to be using simple controls. That's being designed specifically for that, so people can just get to the good part of a fighting game, I'd say.
Wow, that has a lot of things I like in games. Simple controls, robots.
That's all you need. But and Super Smash Brothers is also designed in that way. Like there's a lot of depth in that game, but the controls are, compared to other fighting games, quite simple and intuitive.
Yeah.
But like that's an aspect. The difficulty of understanding controls, or the difficulty in playing the game, deters you from getting to the meat and potatoes of the game, which is unfortunate, but like that's part of it. And that's something like you have to consider, which brings me up to the next question I want to talk about, like difficulty settings in games.
Oh, sure.
Should there be difficulty settings? Sometimes people are like, I don't want to play this game on easy because
then I'm a noob.
Yeah, no one wants to be a noob.
Well, I mean, Fingens has difficulty settings, and I want to hear a lot about how you implement that. But I was thinking about that recently because Breath of the Wild is going. The latest Zelda game is going to have some DLC called Hard Mode.
Yeah,
and that made me think like, oh, there's no settings in that game. It's just that game, and everybody loves it. And it's hard in places, and it's not. It's easy in others, and it's really well tuned. And it kind of there's a lot of confidence to just like not just saying this is the game. Especially when you're going for a really wide audience, the way Nintendo does.
Yeah.
But so when they were announcing hard mode, I think a lot of players, and we've talked about this off mic about, I think people were like, well, what is that going to be? And it's like, well, they said what it was going to be. It's going to be, there's just going to be a couple of harder enemies, And people are like,
Sounds so boring.
People are like, I wanted like more. I wanted them to change the rules to make it harder. And so people were, they read that the press release about it. And they're like, okay, great. Now in a couple, now the later they'll tell us what that means, even though it's right there in the press release. I think people just didn't expect that to be all it was. I mean, I might be wrong, that there might be more to it, but I read that plain as being like, oh yeah, that's what that means. But I think people have a different understanding of what difficulty settings are.
Yeah.
Right. And the like enemy AI gets stronger. There are more of them. You have less health. Like it changes like, certain rules on how the game works. That's what people want from difficulty modes.
Yes.
Right.
Oftentimes, but it's difficult to implement that because it's a lot of work on the developer to support a percentage of your audience. It may be a small percentage of your audience if it's a hard mode or an easy mode. So that's something to consider. So the way difficulty works in Fingens is mostly it's a numbers thing. We up the health on enemies and increase the damage that players are dealt. But there are certain situations where like we won't have an enemy in easy mode that we would have in hard mode for the same chunk. Or in easy mode, you get a lot more healing cogs that heal your entire team. But in hard mode, you don't get any healing cogs except for after bosses or mini bosses.
That's why I die all the time.
Yeah. So that changes things. That changes how you approach it. Like if you're playing on easy mode, you don't have to be as concerned about how much health you have because it's more likely that an enemy you kill will, and you're more likely to kill enemies, but it's more likely that an enemy you kill will give you health so you'll be able to survive later in the thing. And also, you'll have more health regardless. So it's a lot more likely that you'll be able to get through a level. So if you're more interested in the story or maybe unlocking things whenever we add that in the game, that difficulty might serve you better. But if you're looking for a challenge and stuff, hard mode has been tuned in a way so that you'll get more difficult enemies and you won't get as many healing things. So it's something you have to build your team around.
Yeah.
And so hard mode is tuned in a way so that it'll encourage players to consider that before they get into the game and while they're playing the game.
Yeah. Because I know that when you're playing with the right mix of characters and Fingens, suddenly everything seems easier, especially everyone knows what their roles are.
Right.
And I think that's a great way to for a group to master a game, right? But it's nice that you're gearing a difficulty to require that at a certain stage. That's really interesting.
That's awesome.
So do you do a lot with like spacing enemies or like the density of bullets or enemies on screen at different because as a bullet hell shooter I would just assume that would be the main difference.
There is a lot of it is bullets. There's more bullets on screen when in difficulty because there is a tuning that makes some enemies shoot more quickly.
Okay.
Or they might just shoot more bullets or something like that.
Right.
But I believe there's a thing in the game where we limit the amount of bullets that are allowed to be on the screen at one time.
So someone won't shoot if it's saturated.
Yeah. So we don't. So like if in hard mode we could tune the someone's shooting ability crazy so that like they can shoot a ton of stuff, but like it'll be tuned in a way so that it'll be fine because we limit how many bullets are on the screen. So it's not too overwhelming for people. Because
if there's like 30 enemies on screen in hard mode, there's still 30 enemies on easy. They
not necessarily.
Okay, no.
Like I said, sometimes we have different spawners. So some spawners will spawn enemies on medium or hard mode,
okay,
and they won't do it on easy. So we tune it in that way. So sometimes less enemies show up. Yeah. So we've added a lot of levers to design the levels so that they are more or less difficult depending on what we need.
Yeah.
You made a difficulty API?
Yeah.
Actually, you have. I've seen it where you basically have a value which everything looks to and scales accordingly.
Yes.
Right. So that's a perfect example of why you need to do a lot of tweaking. So that's where I'm just flashbacking to our first topic because that's one of the huge values you get from having those tools you build for yourself.
Yeah.
Is being able to like A/B test and like tweak.
Yeah.
And doing that sort of trial by error stuff.
I do that quite a bit when I'm working on Fingens. It's kind of fun. But I know a lot of games when they have difficulty settings, they'll just change the numbers. So you deal less damage or you deal more damage if you're on hard or easy or whatever.
Yeah.
I know that's how they do it in Skyrim, which is really annoying, frankly, is they'll just increase the amount of damage or the amount of damage you take and decrease the amount of damage you deal. So, and really Skyrim combat. Oh man, we should just do a rant on Skyrim. Skyrim combat. It's basically 2 health bars running into each other, and one of them will just end up on top.
Yeah.
So when you have, when you just increase the amount of health that you have, or or whatever, or decrease the amount of health, it just increases the length of combat. It doesn't increase the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
At least to me, it felt like that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I didn't find it to be a very interesting way of dealing with difficulty, but sometimes just changing numbers might make a game more or less enjoyable for a particular audience or particular difficulty that you want.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, really what you do in Fingeance is that, but with a little bit more depth, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit, you tweak a little bit more.
Right.
So it doesn't just, you're not just adding 10 to something and subtracting 10 from something else. Or whatever.
Right. So
you also scale difficulty depending on how many players are on screen.
A little bit. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, because we have to do that out of necessity. Otherwise, the game will be way too easy if you just have 4 players.
Yeah. But, I feel like that, I don't know from experience, but that feels like something that you have to do for that type of game. But I remember when you described that to me some time ago, I was like, oh, that must be really hard to balance.
It's very difficult.
So I'm just sort of impressed at how well it works, because I've played your game single player. I've played with 3 players or 4 players, and it doesn't actually feel different. It doesn't feel harder, like on the same mode. It doesn't feel easier or harder when you have more players.
Yeah.
It always feels about that difficulty.
Yeah.
That gotta be hard. Like,
yeah, it's
speaking
really
of difficulty.
It is. Yeah. But like, do you guys feel that difficulty settings should be a thing? Do you feel like they should exist? Are they appropriate for all games? Are they inappropriate for some?
For certain games, for your game particularly, it's really good.
Oh yeah,
it adds dimensions of work for you guys. But certainly, a game you want to be approachable, and you want to, because it adds replayability, and you have an unlockable super hard mode that's totally broken. You've described like that is also, that gives it some value to the player on top. I can think about what I intend to do for the single player mode in my game, and I very much don't want to have any kind of difficulty settings. I want to have a canonical experience.
Yeah.
And that's true for a lot of games that I like. So yeah, I think it really depends on, there's a lot of things that would preclude you from doing it or require you to do it, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I really like Civ has a difficulty setting.
Oh, sure.
How good are the decisions that the AI makes is basically the thing. Yeah, and I really like that, because if there is a game I just want to think about, I just put it easy and then explore the whole map and win. But you can scale it up if you want more thinking experience or whatever.
Yeah,
and I really enjoy how you do it in Fingeance, because like if you're playing with like a little kid, you can put the difficulty down to easy. But if you're like, okay, we got our team of 4. We're going to go up against the deep sea, secret mode, and we're going to totally beat it, even though we all are going to die. And that's cool. And it also feels like when you can start beating levels on more difficult settings, then it feels like that sense of progression is there. So that's
right.
Yeah. It becomes more content.
Yeah.
It's not just a settings change in that
exactly.
case.
Yeah, it's more content.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess there's argument out there with certain games, particularly like Dark Souls and things like that, where that game is extreme. I didn't find it that difficult, to be honest. Just more scary than anything. But
there's Steven bragging again.
It frightened him, but it wasn't that hard.
Right. Yeah. But Dark Souls is a lot of people really like that game because of the lore and the way they handle the story in that game.
Yeah.
But it's not very approachable. But the reason why it's not approachable is kind of important to the lore. And so a lot of people say that if they had difficulty settings, or if Dark Souls was easier, that game wouldn't work as well. And so it's just an interesting way of approaching difficulty that I hadn't considered until Dark Souls came out.
As someone who's not at all interested in playing any of the Souls games, I'm attracted to that reasoning.
Yeah.
I like the idea that there's just one. Just like, saying like there's a canonical experience. And if it's too hard for some people, then the game's not for those people.
Yeah, that's the argument people say.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are like, well, don't you want your game to be sold to as many people as possible and get the word out there and get more people to play it and support your game? But it might not make your game as good of an experience if you have to, adjust it for everyone.
Right, right.
Sometimes games just have to be tuned in that way, I think.
Yeah. one example where you can kind of have your cake and eat it too that I really like, and this is another Nintendo example because they always do good with this sort of thing, is Kirby's Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Woolly World. The same developer and very cute, adorable games, and they are kind of impossible to lose. Like they're very
I think it's literally impossible to lose in Kirby's Epic Yarn.
Yeah, like you can't die, right? Like the Yoshi's Woolly World, I think, has to kill you because Yoshi's Island is famously difficult. So they have to have some legacy there. But I think you can actually turn on a mode in that game where there are coverings over every hole, so there's no physical way to die. It's definitely like a play with your niece or nephew kind of mode. But what's also great about those games is that they're just charming as hell, right? So like they don't have to be hard, but they have like unlockables which are crazy difficult to get, and that's something that my wife really likes those games. Because they don't stress her out, and then she decides how stressed out she wants to get. So when she goes for the really hard ones and has to, like, the game doesn't demand it of her, like she steps up to do it. And I think that's what she really likes about that. And
that's how in a lot of Mario games, that's how they handle difficulty, is they just have collectibles that are really hard to get that you can go for, but you don't have to.
I like the more recent Mario games, especially, like they're not hard for anyone to complete almost any level. Like some of the later ones, like you maybe have to try once or twice just to get through the basics, but for the most part, they're easy games. But if you're a longtime Mario fan, they're just as hard as they've ever been. And so I quite like that. The one exception I think for Mario is when you die a couple times, it gives you an option of like a bonus item. Like
that's right.
I feel like that is just, I think that's bad game design, frankly. Like it's sort of it's a way out. I don't know. It's probably useful to people who really hate it, but
I think
really,
it's probably for children who
that's probably true.
Who just want to play the game and don't really care.
I suppose so, but I think I know that as like I will die a lot trying to get one of the unlockables or one of the special items. And the game will say, "Hey, you're having a hard time with this level. Would you like infinite P-wing or whatever the game is?" And I'm like, "No, game. That's not what I'm doing right now." So I find that there's a little bit of a conflict there, but that's a rare speed bump, I think, in the way that they handle those things. And that's something I want to do with Metro Nexus for my single player mode. Is I want to have something a game that the game it's an homage to is sort of like stupid difficult, and so I want to keep some of that, but I want the game to be level to be solvable, but I want to have like efficiency bonuses that are very difficult. I have not approached the level design required to get there yet. I'll probably talk on future episodes about how I still haven't started doing that because it feels like it's a huge thing once I've released multiplayer. But I very much appeals to me, something that's you can beat and then go back to like beat on a higher level with different skills. Like, because I very much appreciate that in games. I like partly because I just like puzzle solving. And I like to apply that. So it's an aspiration I have for my game.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. Of having difficulty is just having different collectibles or like bonuses and unlockables. That's actually, now that I think about it, a lot of older games, that's how they dealt with it. Maybe the main storyline or whatever wasn't super difficult, but if you wanted to get fancy character, you had to beat it without taking a single hit. That's like overkill, but
right.
That kind of way.
I don't like those. The sort of like achievement style, like next level things where it sort of artificially makes something difficult just for you to check something off a box. I mean, there's a fuzzy line where when you put that in that category and when you don't, but like I don't react well to that kind of like content padding
just for like achievement hunting sort of purposes.
Because it feels like what's the point of this if it's just like going through without getting hit once? It's like, okay, I guess, but the game isn't designed for that to be part of the core mechanic. It shouldn't be an extra sort of thing.
It's just an additional challenge. The way achievements are designed, at least the way I see them designed, is that they're just additional challenges that the game designers or whoever makes the achievements felt was a fun thing you could do for the game. So they're always side things, but if you want to gain or you want to get points or whatever, if you care about that kind of stuff, that's something you can go for.
That's like I keep thinking of Dishonored, and my boyfriend Dylan has played that game so many times, and we were just all talking about it, and how like in that game, there's levels of difficulty in that it's high chaos and low chaos. So if you kill a bunch of people, like if you just go through the level and kill everybody, then you get the high chaos ending, and you like every new level you go into will have more and more enemies. Well, I guess it's not the easy way. Yeah, so both ways are difficult. But anyway, as you get more and more chaos, the more and more enemies there are, etc. And then the other way is that you have to be really sneaky and sneak around and find clever ways of getting around people and stuff. And there's a lot of achievements like go through a certain way, don't kill anybody, or don't be seen by anybody.
Yeah.
And I think it adds to replayability. You can just go through ignoring all of those things and it'll be an easier game, or you can add difficulty to yourself.
Yeah, and there's different types of difficulty that you can choose to go for.
Right.
That's interesting.
That's like the achievements.
Yeah,
effectively.
I think
but even in the base game, like you can either go for combat difficulty or sneak difficulty.
Yeah, I got
right.
you.
And they're different and they're almost contradictory, but they're both designed deliberately for the game, rather than one being an add-on to the other or something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny because one type of difficulty I know, Steven, you don't like is point and click difficulty.
Oh yeah, that's not difficult. That's just not
It's just real hard.
No, it's not. No, that's
it's just a bad game. Just
if you guys could see the steam coming out of his ears now.
Oh my goodness. Okay. The thing about point and click difficulty is that it's not that it's difficult; it's that it's unintuitive and not logical a lot of the times. At least for me, and so I don't like those kinds of games because that is not a kind of difficulty I can appreciate.
Yeah, we're totally opposites on this.
I guess because approaching a puzzle in a unique way or an interesting way to get through it is fine.
Yeah.
But when there's only one solution, and that solution is to take the macaroni and put it in your head to make hair so you can win a beauty contest, that doesn't make sense.
Well, didn't you figure that one out?
No, I didn't. Somebody else did. I think we might have had to look that dang puzzle up. I don't remember. But this is a real example from a game, guys. What's it?
Day of the Tentacle.
Day of the Tentacle.
One of the greatest.
Yeah. It has very frustrating puzzles.
Well, Martha, you're making a point and click, but it's not. You're not designing it for old school people who want to break windows when thinking about it. Like you want it to be approachable for kids, right?
Yeah.
So how are you approaching difficulty in your game?
I haven't gotten to that point yet. Okay. But I want it to be like have some little bit tricky puzzles, but only tricky. Like I want it to be like a Pajama Sam or a Spy Fox, like fun and have a good story and have some things that are hard, but not too hard.
Yeah.
And all make sort of sense, at least in a kid's mind. Makes sense.
So I'm not as familiar with those games, so I don't.
Oh.
So because there are different types of things you can have, like the Professor Layton style, where you go to a place and then you have to do a mini game that is a certain challenge to unlock the story, and then there's the old point and click style where the puzzle is entirely story related, like Day of the Tentacle. Like, what's the example you're?
Yeah, they're story based.
Okay.
But like it's not. There aren't any puzzles like you have to click this pixel or you have to know cultural metaphors to wash cars to make the rain or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all very much like, oh, this person needs a thing. You can't get that thing because it's on a shelf. Someone else has the ladder, and you need to get them. Like go on, get them something. And in there's like a few items that you can just pick up. And so it's basically a trading game. You have to figure out who to give what.
Sure.
Like in Spy Fox, you have a little notebook that if you talk to someone who has a problem, you get a little talk balloon and you can click the talk balloon and then throw it at another person, like click another person. And then your character will ask them about, oh, do you know anything about so-and-so's problem?
I like that trading game metaphor, because I think the problem with some of these point and clicks is that there's not you do grab and hold and apply objects, but so it has a consistent mechanic, but the metaphor is not always consistent. Whereas I think you're almost describing like, give this person this thing, and that mechanic, not just what you do mechanically with your mouse, but like actually the action you take in the game. If that is consistent, then I think you can make it a little more challenging without frustrating a player who might not be interested in like lateral thinking.
If you have consistent rules, then people can approach the game and it makes sense.
Right.
So like in Breath of the Wild, there's a lot of ways that you can approach different puzzles and stuff, but it has consistent rules that you can that you approach puzzles with.
Sure.
But like in Day of the Tentacle, you might have to pull something in one way and for one puzzle, and then pull it in another way in another puzzle that don't make any sense or that are that don't make it. Yeah, they just don't make any sense. So it's not intuitive, and so people will have a hard time. At least me.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that kind of stuff because you gave me this rule set and you want me to use a completely different rule set in order to get through this puzzle.
And that is by design. Like
Yes.
that is part of the challenge that they said is that lateral thinking.
Right.
But that is also something that can be unapproachable. And also as a designer, it can be unpredictable. You don't necessarily know without tons of playtesting.
Yeah.
You don't always know how people are going to react to that.
Right. Yep.
So I think in Double Fine Adventure, that documentary, I think Tim Schafer talks about playtesting puzzles in Broken Age and how and things they just assumed would be easy or obvious weren't, and things they thought would be utterly impossible, people just knew right away. Like the clues were there and they didn't realize they'd set them. That kind of sort of thing. So again, playtesting is another way to do this. But you can do something that doesn't have that sort of like 3 levels deep lateral thinking, and then that gives you some license to make it a little harder at that one level, perhaps.
Right.
Yep, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, probably makes it easier to playtest because you don't have to check for as many sort of scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's how you approach difficulty, guys. All of the ways.
With caution.
With caution, but also all of the ways.
All the way. That's our show. If you haven't already, subscribe to Nice Games Club in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to give it a good review if you liked it, or nice like us. We do need to know you're out there, so leave a review and tell all your friends too. Also want to hear from you on our feedback form. Steven, what's the URL?
nicegames.club/feedback.
Martha, what's the URL?
nicegames.club/feedback.
If you didn't hear that twice, it's nicegames.club/feedback. We also want to hear directly from you, so follow us on Twitter and all the other things at Nice Games Club. Let us know how we're doing, send us your topics, and ask us your questions. Lastly, you can find out more about the show and your nice hosts, as well as get all the links and notes from this and other episodes at nicegames.club. So, until we start again, remember to
Play nice.
And make nice.
I may also have copied this document. I don't remember.
And we don't have to have that in the recording.
Yeah, that